One of the fundamental concepts that you have to get a grasp of in After Effects is how to animate effects over time. So in this example, I'm going to show you how to animate a basic effect called CC Blobby Lies. And I have the worst time trying to figure out that name, Blobby Lies. Anyway, let's go ahead and see what it's going to look like. I'll hit spacebar in this comp to play a preview. Notice that it kind of melts in, stays for a while, and then melts out. So let's see how we did this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this particular comp. So Command D. And rename it and call it Pixel or Blobulize New. And the reason why I did that, you could just create a new comp here with all these settings. I just usually set 6 seconds and change the background color if I need to, but it's high definition automatically. And the reason why I do that is because I like to have this text here across all different projects, since this is all going to be kind of one big project. But this, just do whatever you need to do for your particular project. So I'll go ahead and grab the text tool and type in all caps the word and pick a font that I think is going to look good. That's horrible. We're just going to do something simple and make it smaller so it fits, and I'm going to go ahead and change it to white. Okay, so some of these effects that you use in After Effects, what's happening right here is I had the caps lock on, and when it's on, it won't refresh the preview. So if you just disable cap locks or shut it off, it'll do refresh preview every time you move things around. All right, so now that I have this text, I'm ready to go and add an effect. So I'll go ahead to this effects and presets and clear out whatever I was searching before. And I can go to distort and find CC Blobby Lies, or you can type a few of the letters in here, blobby, and there it is. So with that text selected, I can double click to add the effect. As you can see, it automatically adds a visual effect. And if you just want to make something look a certain way and it doesn't need to be animated, then that's absolutely okay. Fine, here, now I'm done. But if I wanted to animate over time, I have to kind of mess with the settings and see what each of the settings does. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to change this right here because it's supposed to say Blobby Lies. Okay, so clicking on that text layer over here in the comp timeline, notice that when I added the CC Blobby Lies effect, it opened an effect controls panel, and I can mess with the different effect controls here. I can also come down here and go to the effects, and this word wasn't a part of this text until we added the CC Blobby Lies. So I'll go ahead and bring this down, and as you can see, it has the Blobby Lies effect, which means you can essentially add as many effects as you want to this particular text. So in here, I'll also have a section called Blobbiness, and I have this section called Blobbiness here. So what I usually do is I'll select that word, and I'll just start playing with different things. And right here, it doesn't look like anything happens except for it makes it disappear when I choose this second layer. So that's not going to work well for me. And let's see. Let's just choose Blobby Lies, and I can choose if it's going to show alpha or red, and it changed it a little bit, but I don't think that really matters to me. So I'll just leave it at lightness. And I'll toggle down softness and choose, and it looks like when I do that, it kind of starts melting together in this really cool chrome look, so I really like that. And I can also choose cutaway, and that's going to kind of eat away at the text. So as you can see, it's going to eat away. Now notice as I do this, it gets really pixelated on my screen, and that's just because it's giving you a preview, but it's not going to do a full high definition render until you stop moving those effects around. So that's still okay. It doesn't mean that it's going to be pixelized. It's just trying to work with your system and if you don't have a lot of RAM, etc. So I like the way that when I come over here, it looks good, but when I pull it down, it kind of disappears and gets really kind of liquid move out. So let's go ahead and keep messing with a couple. I'll undo some of these, and I'll come and undo that. And all right, so I can mess with the light intensity, so maybe, and it's kind of jumping around and getting weird, and I don't like that, but all right, so we can mess with all these other different options, but that's just kind of play and do what you need to do. If you need to reset it, click reset up here and it'll go back to the original settings. So I know that softness and cutaway are the two things that I want to animate. Now, if I change these settings, I can change these settings, but it's not going to really do anything. It's not animating. It just changed the visual appearance to this permanent visual appearance. So I'll go ahead and undo that. This is what I want it to look like, but I actually want it to kind of melt in, look like this for a while, and then melt out. So in order to animate something, you have to turn on the stopwatch. The minute you turn on the stopwatch, it starts animating and adding something called a keyframe. And a keyframe indicates a change in something. Well, not always a change in something, and you'll see when that happens in a second. But if I click the softness stopwatch, it's going to animate that property over time. Then if I click the cutaway stopwatch, it's going to animate that property over time. So anytime you make a change, it's going to create a keyframe. Keyframes look like these little diamonds right here. And notice wherever my playhead was, it added a keyframe that kept those properties stable at that point in time. So right now, this is what this text looks like according to these keyframes. If I move down later and change a property, like let's say I make it a little bit more liquidy and gooey and like they start moving into each other, then it's going to add a keyframe right there. So it's going to say from 0 seconds to about 20 frames or a minute and 20 frames in, it's going to go from regular to this really liquidy version. So let's see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and hit spacebar. And as you can see, it just starts to morph. And that's what keyframes do, is it tells you it should look like this at this point in time, and it should look like this at this point in time. And it'll do everything in between on its own. That's called a tween animation. You set what it should look at point A, you set what it should look at point B, and it'll do everything else in between. So even though that was cool animation, that's not necessarily what I want. So I can go ahead and highlight that keyframe and delete it. So I like these two keyframes. This is what I want my word to look like, but I want it to look like that probably about 3 seconds in. I want it to melt into that and then melt out of that. So with my playhead at the beginning of the timeline, I'll do about 10 frames in. Now I want to change my cutaway settings to really make it like disappear. So as you can see, the cutaway now has a new keyframe at the beginning. Softness doesn't because I didn't change the softness property. So now if I hit spacebar to preview this, we should see it go from cutaway in to the finished text, and then it just stays there because we don't have any other keyframe. So it assumes whatever the last keyframe was, that's what it should look like for the rest of the project. So if I want it to melt out, I can move my playhead to the end of the timeline or the animation, and again I can cut it away. And so now it's going to go from this setting where it was at 25 cut away, and it's going to animate over time to this setting where it was at 100 cut away, which means it's 100% cut away, it's not even there. So let's watch this. So it animates in and then immediately animates out. So that's not bad, but here's the thing. I actually want it to stay for a while so people have time to read that word. And it's automatically animating in, and then as soon as it gets fully settled, it automatically starts animating out. So I'm going to actually move, I'm marquee selecting by clicking and dragging. I'm going to move those two keyframes over here, and about here I'm going to want the same exact keyframes so that it stays kind of steady that whole time. So if I want it to look like the same settings here, I can copy these two keyframes by doing Command C or Control C, and wherever my playhead is, I'll do Command or Control V and paste those exact same settings. So notice that back here, my keyframe was at 20 softness and 25 cutaway. Now here, I can click on this keyframe and it's again 20 and 25. So that's the best way to do this. Now let's undo a lot of this stuff and show you the easier way to do this. We want this text to look like this at about 2 seconds in. Then we also want it to look like that at about 4 seconds in. Well, I can either again copy and paste, or down here we have these little buttons to add or remove a keyframe. So I'm going to create stable keyframes again for both of those properties, and it's doing both of them at the same time because they're both selected, but I can go ahead and add keyframes there so we know that they're going to be stable. Now I can come over here, and about 20 frames in I can change the cutaway, and I actually want to make it really super blobby, and I'm going to come about 10 frames after 5 seconds, and I'm going to again make it super blobby, and I'm going to have it cut away again. So let's see how this whole animation looks now. Okay, so it stays for a while and then it melts back into the black. So this animation to me looks really good. I can tweak the time by moving these sets of keyframes. So let's say I want it to animate really fast in. Notice the distance between where we don't see it and where we do see it is really short now. So it's going to go a lot faster. But this gap is a lot bigger, so the time that we actually see the text stable on the composition is going to be longer. So let's go ahead to the beginning of our animation, hit the space bar, goes really fast. We see it for a much longer time now, and then it melts out really fast. So that's the basics of working with animation. A couple things you should know: if you unclick the stopwatch, it automatically gets rid of all of those keyframes. So the minute you do it, and if you accidentally did it and you press the stopwatch again, it doesn't matter, those keyframes are all gone. So if that happens and you didn't mean for it to happen, you can do Command or Control Z to undo and bring that back. But that's a good way if you didn't want to animate this over time and you were just playing around, or you decide later that you just want it to look the way it looks but without animating. Instead of coming in here and deleting all of these different keyframes, you can unpress the stopwatch and it'll all automatically delete the keyframes.